Great. Students, if I could have your attention. Today we're going to be doing a follow-up from the mock crash that you saw yesterday. So I would like to introduce you to Bailiff Bradley Kahn. He's going to give you just a quick intro on what we're going to be doing today. So if you could give him your attention, I would appreciate it.
Good morning. I am the bailiff for probate and juvenile court here in Holmes County. In just a minute, you're going to witness a sentencing of the result of what happened yesterday during the mock crash. In juvenile court, we call it a disposition, but just to clarify, it is a sentencing. So it is customary in these proceedings when the judge comes into the courtroom, the bailiff says, "All rise." You're part of this audience, you're part of the proceedings. So when I say all rise, I expect everybody here to stand as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All rise.
You may be seated. This is Holmes County Court, Big Juvenile Division. We're here this morning on case number 17D-069 with Brian Yoder. Brian has admitted to one count of negligent vehicular homicide, caused a crash to occur, resulting in some tragic consequences for a number of people. We're here today to determine what happens to Brian as a result of that crash. Let me introduce the people who are playing a role today. First of all, on my left, this is Brian Yoder, our juvenile driver. His attorney, Mr. Mason, is seated with him. We have representatives from the State Highway Patrol and the Holmes County Sheriff's Office here as well. Prosecuting Attorney Ole is here on my right. Good morning. He'll be representing the state of Ohio in this hearing. Probation Officer Williams is beside him. Morning. Victims Assistance Office is an office that represents the interests of victims in situations like this. The representative here today from the Victims Assistance Office is Tina Zicafus. We have one of the injured participants in the crash, Mitch Massaro is here. His father, Jeff Massaro. Jeannie Cutler is here. She's the mother of Sabrin, who was killed in the car crash. Dwayne Yoder is the father of Brian. And as I mentioned, Brian Yoder is our driver. So, as I stated, we're here today for sentencing to determine what this court is going to do with Brian as a result of his actions that led to this crash. I'm going to start with Probation Officer Williams. He prepared what we call a predispositional report and investigation about the facts of this case, an investigation into Brian and his family and everything else, and he's prepared a report with some suggestions for the court. So, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Your Honor. In regards to the offense that brought us into court, Brian was the driver of a car containing 3 of his friends in it. There was a head-on collision with one fatality, who was Sabrin Cutlet, the driver of the other car. A friend of his, who was in the passenger seat, Mitch Massaro, suffered head trauma, as well as spinal cord injury, and is currently unable to walk. It was discovered Brian was using his cell phone at the time of the crash, and nobody was wearing a seatbelt. A predispositional report was ordered to investigate the history of the defendant, Mr. Brian Yoder, in order to determine an appropriate sentence. Brian is a senior at Highland High School. He has no prior offenses. This is his first dealing with the court. He lives with both his parents and is the youngest of 4 children. He has an older brother and 2 older sisters. This incident has changed the environment inside their home. His mother has been depressed. His father is still in a state of shock and has not shown a lot of emotion. Brian also reported the incident has also made the relationship with his siblings awkward. As for Brian himself, he describes himself as outgoing, funny, and he's employed at Berlin Village Gift Barn, and plays on the varsity baseball team at Highland High School. He is a good student with no suspensions or expulsions, gets along well with his teachers and school personnel, and plans to attend Malone University to play baseball. He has no history of drug or alcohol abuse. In short, Your Honor, I think Brian is what you want in a young man. He goes to school and gets good grades. He has a job. He plays sports. However, I also thought he was a little arrogant and did not sense the kind of remorse I would expect in a fatal car crash. Life is about choices, and one wrong choice can change one's life and the life of others forever. Like Brian, Mitch Massaro wanted to play college baseball. But in order to play baseball, you need to walk to the batter's box, you need to run the bases, you need to run to field fly balls, you need to run to field ground balls. Mitch cannot do that right now because he can't even walk. And like Brian, Sabrin Cutlet wanted to go to college. She will not graduate from college. She will not attend a college class. She will not go to her college orientation. She will not graduate high school because she is dead. A husband who has lost a wife is a widow. A wife who has lost her husband is a widow. A child who loses their parents is an orphan. But what do you call a child who has lost, a parent who has lost a child? The answer is there is not a word for it. It is so horrific that there is no word for it. It is the darkest of human events when a parent has to look over a casket and see their child lying dead in it. It is a parent's worst nightmare. This nightmare has become a reality for the Cutlet family. This nightmare has become a reality because of the choice Brian Yoder made. Therefore, Your Honor, based on the facts of the case, as well as the defendant, as well as the victims, I think the recommendations I have made do two things. One, it ensures justice that matches the severity of this crime and brings justice to the victims. Two, holds Brian accountable for his actions and hopefully prevents him from making choices like this in the future. Therefore, Your Honor, following recommendations I've made are: one, Brian will remain on indefinite probation up till the age of 21. Because of Brian's actions, I think he not only put his friends and Sabrin Cutlet at risk, anyone who puts a cell phone in their hands when they're driving puts the entire community at risk, and I think he owes something to the community. Therefore, I think he should also perform 150 hours of community service. We also ask that Brian will engage in counseling at our local counseling agency and as our community partners. 4, that Brian work with the Holmes County Safe Drivers Coalition. This is in order to educate others on the dangers of distracted driving. We want people to tell his story and what he's learned from it. 5, Brian must relinquish his personal cell phone, his iPad, and all other electronic devices for an indefinite period. Recommendation 6, Brian will attend, complete, and pay for the distracted driver's course offered by the Wayne Holmes Driving Association. Recommendation 7, Brian's license will be suspended for 3 years. Recommendation 8, Brian will pay the maximum court fines of $1,000 and court costs of $150 on each count. Recommendation 9, he will pay restitution on the following: for the funeral of Sabrin Cutlet. Restitution made at $11,577. He paid the auto repair, restitution in the amount of $5,000. He pays the squad fee, $250. He pays for family counseling for the Cutlet and Massaro family, which is assessed at $500 per family. He also pays the towing fee from the accident of $150. And he also pays for the life flight of Mitch Massaro, restitution at $10,000. I would also ask that Brian make an in-court apology today to the following individuals: the family of Sabrin Cutlet, as well as his friend Mitch Massaro, as well as the family of Mitch Massaro. And for my last recommendation, I think Brian has taken something from two families, as well as even his. He's taken life, he's taken happiness, he's taken innocence. I think he needs to have his freedom taken away from him and spend time removed from society where he can think about his actions. I therefore recommend he serve 90 days at the Richland County Juvenile Jail to be served immediately. Parents will be required to cover those daily costs of $100 a day for a total of $9,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Old, anything else from the state of Ohio?
Thank you, Your Honor. I rise now to speak for the people of Holmes County. You will hear from the individual victims involved here. As part of the pre-sentence investigation, you have seen numbers in excess of $300,000 for the costs involved, hard costs with future care, medical expenses, as well as the expenses presented to you in the probation department. But those are just numbers. Before you reach this position, I want you to ask yourself this question and ask this child this question. What's a child? What is a child's life worth? Is it worth the few seconds it takes to not take a selfie of yourself or play with your phone? Is that life worth those few seconds? What is the crushed and crumpled life of an individual whose life has been altered by this crash? What is that life worth? Is it worth not piling your car of other children, other 16-year-olds that the law tells you you cannot do? Is that life worth that? Your Honor, what is the message that you will give to that child here today? What is it worth? What is that message worth on behalf of the people of Holmes County to all other individuals who think it's more important to take a picture of yourselves with your friends in the car when the music is playing and you kill somebody? The message for the people of Holmes County that we ask you here to give is that life, those lives, have value. You need to take control of this child's life until he's 21. The people of Holmes County need to be protected and need to know that this kind of behavior, which has such risk to it, needs to be expressed that your behavior matters. Those lives matter. Till he's 21, Your Honor, keep control. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Old. Mr. Mason, anything on behalf of your client?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of Brian Yoder, Attorney Grant Mason, first of all, with respect to this sentencing, there's a number of issues that have been brought up by the Juvenile Probation Department. Perhaps the easiest issue to discuss at this sentencing are the financial sanctions. I would respectfully submit that this is not the proper forum for the imposition of any restitution or civil damages. And that would be primarily because due process issues are called into play, especially with respect to the enormous figures discussed by the Juvenile Probation Department. Without our ability to call in any expert witnesses on the issue of these damages, I believe that Mr. Yoder's due process rights would be violated. The Ohio Supreme Court has recognized this very fact in the case of Robinson v. Bates, where there's a lengthy discussion about the substantial differences between the amounts charged for medical care and treatment and what actually medical providers accept. Those are issues for a jury. This matter is, in all likelihood, going to end up in a civil lawsuit, and that is the proper form for these issues to be determined. With respect to the loss of freedom, Your Honor, you do have a wide authority as far as any sentencing. This is where your wisdom and judgment comes in. Mr. Yoder was cited under the distracted driving statute, and that increases or enhances the penalties that you can assert against Mr. Yoder. If he had been distracted by simply playing with the radio or talking with a friend, he wouldn't be facing these penalties. Yes, there was a momentary lapse of judgment and of wisdom, but with that being said, that does not necessarily mean that there should be a substantial or a lengthy term of incarceration. This is a tragedy. There's no question about that, Your Honor. My client is remorseful. He's realized that he's made a terrible mistake. We've heard that he's never been in any trouble before. He has a clean driving record. He has good grades. He's planning on going to college and playing baseball. He has a bright future ahead of him. But no matter what you do to him today, he's going to have to live with what he has done. And he realizes the mistakes that he's made. In conclusion, I'm not minimizing what has happened at all today. But the punishment must fit the crime. With respect, in conclusion, we would ask that no financial sanctions be imposed against my client. Allow the civil process to impose those fines. With respect to any incarceration, we'd ask that no incarceration be given. If so, it would be a minimal amount of time, just to allow my client to fully realize the gravity of the situation. No objection to any driving suspension. I think that would be appropriate. No objection to community service. The issue of relinquishing the cell phone and the iPad, I'm not sure how realistic that is, Your Honor. In today's world, you essentially need those items if you're going to go to school, to do research, to communicate with others. So I don't know that that's a realistic sentencing recommendation.
Mr. Mason, I disagree. I think the court has every right to take a cell phone, to take iPads, to bar a juvenile from being on any kind of social media during terms of probation. I think the court has a right to impose that penalty.
In any case, Your Honor, we would ask that you take all these matters into consideration as far as fashioning any sentence for my client. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I would now like to hear from, I want to give the victims of this incident a chance to speak. Brian, I'm going to give you a chance in just a second, so I want to hear what you have to say. But first, I want to hear from, let's start with Mitch Lassaro. Mitch is the injured driver, the injured passenger that was in Brian's car. Mitch, what's on your mind this morning?
Brian, we've been best friends for a while. I just can't believe that you got in a wreck over something so stupid as Snapchat and texting. You know, we were going to go to Malone together, do baseball together, and win. Now I can't even walk. I want to forgive you, man. I really do, but I can't right now. My life's ruined.
Thank you, Mitch. Anything else? Mr. Massaro, Jeff, I'd like to hear from you about the impact this has had on your son and your family.
Thank you, Your Honor. Brian, I had a dream. I've known you, as well as Mitch, obviously, for quite a few years of your life. And that dream began many years ago, watching the two of you play baseball locally and around the country. 6 months ago, that dream turned into a nightmare. And I know in your heart, there was no malice, there was no intent. I don't know what to say to you, Brian. It was a mistake that should not have happened. I do, indeed, I want to forgive you. I believe if it were me, I would want to go to jail rather than face the community in light of what has happened. I truly want to forgive you, Brian, but I can't right now either. God be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Massaro. Ms. Cutler, I'd like to hear from you if you're able to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. I did not know you. And I had a dream once, too, of having a child, and she was my only child. So my dream of having grandchildren will never happen. And I'm here with her best friend, and she will never stand up in the aisle with her best friend at a wedding. And I don't know if I could ever forgive you. I hope that that cell phone is very much worth it. And your attorney talks about your dreams, and you were a good kid. My daughter was a good kid, too. So I hope that you spend the rest of your life thinking about what you did. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Ms. Cutler. Mr. Yoder, I'd like to give you a chance to speak if you'd like on behalf of your son, Brian.
First of all, I would like to apologize on behalf of our family for what has happened here to Saber and also to Mitch and the tragedy here that Brian has caused. Brian's mother and I are very sad. We do understand that we have failed maybe in some parenting things and choices that we have made, but obviously we could have done more. We too are reminded every day of the losses that are caused to these families. And we really do apologize. I hope someday you can forgive Brian and his family. It also affects our whole family, our children, and it will affect Brian. We do understand for the rest of his life for the choice that he has made here. Brian is a good kid, but he did make a bad choice, and we do understand he is accountable for this. If we could, we would like to take this all back and change this, but it is too late. And we do understand that. So forever we will be indebted to these families, and we love you. And again, we do apologize and say we are sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Yoder. Brian, we heard a lot of folks talking about you this morning. I would like very much to hear what's on your mind, what's on your heart this morning. This is your opportunity.
Yes, I wanted to say I am very remorseful of what I did. Mrs. Cutlip, Mr. Massaro, I'm very sorry. I would take it all back if I could. It was not worth the Snapchat picture I took. Living with this on my shoulders is much worse than the hundreds of thousands of dollars. in bills this costed. Kids don't text and drive. It's not good. I hope you can forgive me at some point, and I realize it was a very wrong decision on my half.
Thank you, Brian. I've heard the same phrase a couple times this morning, something to the effect of take it all back. I wish we could take it all back. I wish we could do it over. That's simply not possible, is it? I wish too we could. I wish we could go back to before this happened. I wish you would have taken seriously all the warnings that you hear and every kid hears, every adult hears about the danger of texting and driving. I don't understand this offense. It's frustrating to me. I think it's an example of selfishness. I think it's an example of arrogance. I think it is just a horrible, horrible decision. And as Mr. Hull said, I need to think about this from the perspective of the community, from the greater Holmes County community. And frankly, Brian, I think you ought to sit for a while. I think you need to sit in detention for a while and think about this. I don't trust you driving one bit, so I'm going to take your license for a long time. You are going to pay a whole lot of money. You're starting off your adult life in a terrible financial hole. I'm going to go through those in just a minute, but you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're going to have to pay. You and your family are going to have to pay. So for the safety of the community, I need to impose a harsh penalty. I think that's certainly warranted here. I will say, Brian, I know you're a young man. I know you've made a horrible decision here. I don't doubt that you're a good kid. Every kid that comes in this court is a good kid. It's all about the decisions. You've made a horrible, horrible one here, and a lot of folks have suffered. Certainly the families of the victims, they have suffered. And you will suffer too. I think every year going forward, as you think about this crash, as the day of May 8th comes around and you think about what happened on that date, you're going to be miserable. And frankly, I hope you are. I hope this haunts you for the rest of your life. I hope you're a disciple for the message that texting and driving, not wearing a seatbelt and driving is a horrible, horrible decision. You should be telling that to people the rest of your life, and I hope you are. So, with that, this is what I'm going to impose this morning. I'm going to place Brian on probation through the age of 21. I'm going to order that he complete 150 hours of community service. Brian, you're going to attend and participate in counseling. You're going to attend and participate in the Safe Drivers Coalition. You will forfeit, give up your cell phone, give up your iPad. You will be on no social media at all. That means Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever that might be, during the term of your probation, which will be for at least the next 3 years. You're going to participate in the distracted driver course. You're going to suspend your driver's license for 3 years. Obviously, no privileges at all during those 3 years. A matter of restitution, I just want to list a number of things that you're going to face here, Brian. I'm going to order a number of these, and several of these are things simply that you're going to have to pay. I think Mr. Mason makes a good point that there will likely be a civil lawsuit. You will likely be sued as a result of this crash. I'm going to order that you pay the funeral costs of roughly $11,000, squad of $250, counseling for both families, as long as that's required. Mr. Williams mentioned $1,000. If it's $10,000, you're going to have to pay it. Towing fee of $150, life flight of $10,000, court fines and costs. I'm going to impose a fine of $500 plus court costs. The other expenses you're looking at, you should know, Brian, that for the cost of a wheelchair, the cost of wheelchair rehab, the cost of that Mitch is going to suffer. As far as nursing home rehab, you're looking at about $50,000 a month for that, $50,000 a month, and that can be ongoing for quite a while. You have vehicle costs of the vehicles that were involved in this crash. So when you total all that together, Brian, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. On the issue of detention, I don't think there's any question, Brian, but that you deserve to be in detention. I think, as Mr. Williams indicated, and I think Mr. Ullman said this, you need to think about this horrible, immature, selfish decision you made. This decision that cost the life of one young lady. She's gone. I hope you heard her mother speaking. I hope that impacted you. You need to sit and think about what you've done, and I hope you learn from it. So with that, I'm going to order that Brian serve 90 days in the Richland County Detention Center. That will be effective immediately. All the costs of that as well will be charged to Brian's family. That's $100 a day for a total of $9,000. Any questions, counsel? Mr. Old?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Mason?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Khan?
All rise.
You may be seated. Well, that concludes our hearing. I want to thank you all. Could I have the lights on out there so I can see these kids? That's better. I want to thank you for your attention during the hearing. I want to take a couple minutes and just talk with you about what you've seen. What you saw was very accurate. That's really what a juvenile court sentencing here in a case like this would look like. You saw the emotion, you saw the anger, people unwilling to forgive at this point. That's very, very common. That's what we see. Clearly there's a little more time between the crash and the sentencing in actual life than what happened here. The crash was yesterday, the hearing was today, that wouldn't happen. But if you notice my attitude toward Brian in the hearing, I was, I think, pretty hard on him. He deserved it. I think it's a time when he deserves to be lectured, he deserves to be punished because of what he did. I think sometimes adults, when they speak to young people like you, take that attitude in general, that it's all about lecturing and preaching and shaking our finger at you and telling you what you have to do. I'm not going to lecture you with preaching about these issues. What I want to do is treat you as responsible young people who have the ability to make good decisions. I really believe that. Each of you sitting here has the capability to make the right decisions on these issues. I want to just reason with you and offer some thoughts for you to consider before you head back to class this morning. First of all, let me address this up front. I'm old now, but I was young once. I remember that at your age, a lot of you are sitting there this morning thinking, this will never happen to me. I am invincible. I am untouchable. Nothing like this is going to happen. I know that some of you are sitting here this morning thinking, I can text, I can read a text, I can text while I'm driving. I'm a better driver than Brian. It's not going to happen to me. Let's talk about that. If you were to ask Brian the day before this crash, what do you think he would have said about that? I bet you he would have said the exact same thing. He would have said, that's not going to happen to me. I'm a better driver than that. I can text and I can read text while I'm driving. I'm a better driver. It wouldn't happen. I'm not going to have a crash. That's what he would say. That idea is simply not true, that you're invincible, that you are safeguarded in some way. If you make a bad decision like this, if you put yourself in a situation where you're driving, texting, taking selfies, driving without a seatbelt, you may skate on it. Honestly, you may skate on it a time or two, 3 or 4 times even. But there will come a time when you're making a bad decision like that, and things are going to happen like that. And at that point, the laws of physics take over, and you have you're stuck, because you're going to be in a bad crash, and that's going to happen. You're going to be regretting it, much like Brian did. I want to talk about dollars for just a second. How many of you saw the pickup truck and the side-by-side ATV out there this morning? You see that when you walked in? Yes, I hope so. We had that put there because I think sometimes it's hard to visualize how much money we're talking about. That truck out there sells for about $62,000. The side-by-side, that little ATV, sells for about $17,000. So a total of $79,000. We wanted to put something that you could see, something concrete that you could look at and say, okay, that represents about that amount of money. What you need to hear this morning is that's not even close. Those two together, that $79,000 is not even close. It's hardly even a start on what this kid would have to pay. And imagine starting out in adulthood having that kind of debt. That's not the way you want to start. Here's my next thing. I want you to think about the text that you've gotten over the last 2 or 3 months and the text that you've sent. I think if all of us, adults included, if all of us were honest, we would say that we haven't received even a single text in the last 2 or 3 months that required an immediate response. I mean, has anybody got one? I know I haven't. My wife hasn't. My kids haven't. It just doesn't happen that often. You don't get texts that require that you get back immediately. That just doesn't happen that often. So the point is, those texts that come while you're driving, they don't require an immediate response. The person on the other end of that text is not going to be disappointed, is not going to be angry. Think about this, if you turn it around, you send a text to a friend, and that friend is driving and doesn't get back to you right away, that friend later tells you, hey, I was driving, I couldn't get back to your text. What are you going to say? You're going to say, that's fine, I understand, right? We all understand that. So when you're on the receiving end of those texts when you're driving, just realize they don't require an immediate response. It's okay to give it a little bit of time, pull off to the side of the road if you have to, wait till you get to where you're going. If you have a friend in the car, have the friend answer the text for you. There are all kinds of options. The final point I want to talk to you about is just the issue of control in life generally. There are a lot of things in life we cannot control, right? You can't control the color of your eyes. You can't control whether or not you go to school because you have to go to school. You can't control the family you're born into. You can't control whether the Cavs repeat as NBA champions, right? You can't control that. There are some things in life that are totally out of your control. But there are certain things in life you can control. And these issues we're talking about today are one of those issues. You can control whether you put yourself in a bad situation like this or not. You have the power to control whether you fasten your seatbelt before heading out. You have the power to control in your life whether you choose to text or receive a text or read a text while you're driving. You have the power to control that. You can control whether you keep that phone in your hand or whether you throw it in the back seat if that's what you have to do to prevent yourself from giving into that temptation. Or put it in your purse. Ladies, put it in your purse, throw your purse in the back seat. You have control in life over that issue. So the hope of all of us, and the reason we put this on this morning is we hope that you grab that control and make the right decision. It's real simple, guys. Just don't drive without a seatbelt. Make sure everybody in your car has a seatbelt on. Don't text while driving. It's not that important. It's a benefit versus risk analysis, right? The benefit of answering that text immediately does not outweigh, it's not even close to the risk that you're putting yourself into, and the people in your car and other people on the road. So our hope is that you grab control of those issues, make the right decision. Be a leader in your peer group. Be a leader among your friends. Start this idea that it's okay to drive and not text at the same time. Stand up and do what's right. That's my encouragement to you this morning. I want to Give a quick couple of thank yous. First of all, Jen Stutzman and Kelly Hosen from Highland and West Holmes. They sort of took the lead on putting this together. I want to thank my staff very much. This was an effort to pull together, and I appreciate all the work that they did. Barry Nicholson from Nicholson's Automotive for use of the truck. Nate Klink from Exodus Cycles for putting the side-by-side ATV out here. So that's it this morning. Have a great rest of the day. Put your cell phones down while you're driving. Fasten your seatbelt. Have a great day, guys.
West Holmes kids, you'll be in fourth period. Have the two side sections. You guys go ahead and exit first. In the middle.